Aquinas never talked about extraterrestrials or anything, but he did have an interesting thing about the natures of Christ. And that's because if you go very far in the theological discussions about, ETs, you do bump into the nature of Christ issue. So give us a little bit on that.
Well, again, he didn't have any kind of science for thinking about inhabited planets. But he did have a lot of interesting questions that he would address. And one of them was, would it have been impossible for God, the Son of God, to unite himself to a second created nature? So for there to be more than one incarnation.
I wonder why he would have done that.
The questions came up among the scholastics, things like that all the time. Yeah, Some of them I think were questions that he just thought, oh, here's a cool question, and so on. But often he's responding to the kind of things that people are asking. And so what he says is that, there's nothing inherently impossible about that. God
that the second person of the Trinity could have been incarnated multiple times.
Yes. Now he has in mind human incarnations, in which case he says, well, we know from our faith that he didn't, but it's not that impossible for him to have done it. He could have. And that it doesn't change what we know to be true about the Trinity and about the incarnation that we do know about, to see a possibility where he could take on another created nature. So that eventually figures into questions about, well, could the Son of God, maybe another member of the Trinity, have had an incarnation somewhere else?
All right, that's the medievals. What if you keep going in time?
So you've got, Cusa really, really kind of broke it up, the discussion. You have all kinds of folks that aren't necessarily saints, but theologians of the highest caliber, folks with the founding of Catholic University of America, eventually with highly respected in German circles. But a couple of them that I think just in later times that are important to see. One is Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. Tan has published some of her books.
Her book's right there next to yours, actually.
Yeah, there you go. And in her visions, she saw life on other planets of different forms. And now, of course, folks will say, well, her writings where there's a claim that her editor may have changed or added or that kind of thing. And that's true. So you can't prove that part in there was something that she wrote. But first of all, it's if there was editing done, it probably was done along the lines of, oh, we better tone this down because people could misinterpret it. That's a pretty wild claim to make, and for the editor to have added. Yeah. But even beyond that, for 50 years after that, is read and praised by highest caliber theologians all over the world. Her works were, and not one of them said, but this thing about life on other planets is contrary to the faith. Yeah. Nobody seemed to object to it or see heresy in that.
Yeah.
The excuse me. Even more interesting to me is Padre Pio. Okay, so he died. I was still alive I was alive by the time he died. It's in the 60s, so it's not legend or something. We have in a couple of books actually. One written by one of his spiritual sons. The life of Padre Pio. He had certain men that he mentored spiritually that he called his spiritual sons. One of them, a spiritual daughter, same kind of thing, but women, who wrote a conversation in which someone asked him, Father, what about life on other planets? What about aliens? I'm paraphrasing. I've got it in my book, the exact quote. And he wasn't just saying it's possible. He said, a typical Pio approach. Are you crazy? What do you mean? You think we're the only ones that give God glory? No, there are others out there that give God glory out there. In fact, they even do a better job than we do because they haven't fallen. That's pretty wild. To me, that's because it's Padre Pio. I mean, if I had been the one asking questions, my next question would have been, Father, is this a conclusion you've come to as a theological opinion, or you're convinced that it's true, or is this something God revealed to you? Because he is known above so many others.
He's a mystic.
A mystic who was that God revealed hidden things to, of all kinds. He could see things happening at a distance. He could see the future. He could read souls. All these things that God was continually revealing to him. That would have been my first question. Is it that kind of thing that you're saying? God has shown you this, or have you just concluded this firmly that it's true? But either way, I've had folks claim, I don't think that really happened. But the books were published by the same by an apostolate that was part of San Giovanni Rotondo, the ministry where he was, by people who knew him. The first one was just a few years after he died. They would have known, the people who published it would have known if he was not really a spiritual son of Padre Pio. They would have known him, and they published the book believing that what he had in it was true. And that's just one little item in many others. But I don't have any reason. And I have, though I can't get the book itself, it's out of print, and it's so far only in Italian. I did have an Italian translator friend who actually found the book for me in Italy, photocopied the pages where the quote was, so that it's not something that's made up. It's real.
About John Paul II?
Yeah. So, all right, here's one of the things I like to say that I think is important, that there are people claiming that the Catechism teaches, based on certain passages, that there can't be extraterrestrial intelligence, or that it was made in the image of God or whatever. And they'll quote the passages. I read those passages a very different way. And I'm not the only one that does, that is not saying that at all, that's a question that's not even in view in those passages that he's referring to, or a number of people refer to. So I say, okay, who is the one person who would be most likely to have the right interpretation of the Catechism, to know what its intention was, and to be able to say if it was right or wrong? Well, St. John Paul II, of course. He's the one who commissioned it. He's the one who shepherded the thing. He's the one who wrote the introduction. He's the warm, enthusiastic declaration affirming it. So if the Catechism taught that it's contrary to our faith, to the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence be contrary to our faith, then why did this happen? On one occasion, an audience in a public audience in a parish in Rome, he's having questions, and a young girl in the audience asked, Holy Father, what about aliens? Now, if he knew that it was contrary to the faith for them to exist, he would have been morally obligated to say, well, actually, dear, that's contrary to the faith. We know they aren't because it's contrary to the faith. He could have even said, we don't know, but science will tell us. But that's not what he said. He said, always remember, they're God's children too. That's an affirmative to me. It's a soft affirmative, but what it's not is a denial. It's not
a denial.
And he would have been irresponsible if he knew that they can't exist. It's contrary to the faith.
Or he could have said they're all demons.
Yeah, he certainly could have said that too. So you've got that Pope Paul VI recorded conversation where he's open to it and can see how non-human intelligence on other planets can be part of the glory of heaven. And then a whole slew of really well-respected theologians. But these are just the ones that are kind of saints or pope or, doctors of the church, fathers of the church.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.